Newsfirst ප්‍රවෘත්ති live බලන්න. අදම Newsfirst FB page එකට ගිහින් like කරන්න. ඉන්න තැනකදී live news බලන්න. දැනුවත් වෙන්න. ඇත්ත දැනගන්න. එය ඔබේ ITI.
Safeguard hand sanitizer නවතම නිෂ්පාදන පෙළ නිරෝගිමත් දිවියකට.
Hello there and a very good evening to all our viewers out there, and welcome to tonight's edition of Primetime News here on TV1. You're joining me, David Paldano. Now, before we head into your stories in more detail, let's first take a look at your headlines this evening. Tighten travel restrictions. Doctors warn that the Delta variant could become the dominant strain in the island. Employing children from poor estate families at residences belonging to the elite in Colombo is an organized human trafficking operation, Attorney General's Department reveals in court. China secures first gold medal at Tokyo Olympics. Chinese president tours Tibet, lands in close proximity to the Indian border. US Secretary of State prepares to tour India. Now, starting off our bulletin with a look at your COVID-19 update. The Ministry of Health has warned that COVID-19 health guidelines could be tightened, taking into account the increasing rate of COVID-19 cases reported daily. Joining an interview with Newsfirst, Deputy Director General of Public Health Services, Dr. Hemantha Herath, said there is a risk of COVID-19 cases further increasing in the future given the spread of the Delta variant, and therefore everyone must act irresponsibly and adhere to COVID-19 health guidelines. We can clearly see that this variant has been identified in patients from the western, northern, southern and eastern provinces. If patients have been found in all of these districts, we cannot confirm that the virus has not spread to the other provinces as well. Everyone knows that we have only detected less than 100 patients with this variant, but those were from random samples that were collected and tested. We could be having a much higher number of patients in the community.
President of the Association of Specialist Physicians, Specialist Dr. Lakkumar Fernando, said there is a risk of the Delta variant becoming the dominant strain in Sri Lanka during the coming months. He said experts have reached this conclusion taking into account the spread of the Delta variant in other parts of the world and the high transmissibility of the strain. Whilst pointing out that the COVID-19 vaccination drive in the country is at a satisfactory level, Dr. Lakkumar Fernando stressed on the shortcomings with regard to the prioritization. The Association of Specialist Physicians is of the view that instead of distributing the vaccine on a provincial level, it is better that the vaccines be distributed according to the efficacy and the age groups as per global standards. The association pointed out that unless such a method of vaccination is followed, the chances of defeating the Delta variant are limited. The Association of Specialist Physicians further questioned as to why the local authorities are granting emergency approval for the use of COVID-19 vaccines that do not possess data in respect of the Delta variant, while other countries are selecting vaccines that are suitable to fight the Delta variant. It further stressed that relaxation of travel restrictions must be reviewed, where the maximum number of people that can gather at one event being limited to between 50 and 60 people, with a cap on the duration of gatherings. The Association of Specialist Physicians also emphasized that a mechanism should be prepared in order to ensure that those who are refusing to receive the vaccine are encouraged to get inoculated. The Secretary of the National Intellectuals Association, Dr. Nihala Besingher, emphasized that the Delta variant is causing the collapse of the health systems in countries like Indonesia, Thailand and Myanmar.
The health system in Thailand, Myanmar and Indonesia have reached a breaking point because of the Delta variant of the COVID-19 virus. If we don't learn a lesson from this and act immediately, we too will face such a situation. The vaccination program were not targeted at the most vulnerable groups in society. Therefore, we will have to face a crisis just like other countries. Only 14% of the entire population have received both jabs of the vaccine and about 20% in the Colombo, Gampaha, Kalutara and Ampara districts. The people of our country are not ready for this crisis that could affect this country.
ඉදිරියේ එන්න තියෙන ව්‍යසනයකට සූදානම් නැහැ කියලා තමයි අපි හිතන්නේ.
මේ වන විට ඩෙල්ටා ප්‍රභේදය
The number of PCR and antigen tests conducted have been reduced. If we conduct about 25,000 tests, we could identify more patients. Are we welcoming the fourth wave of the COVID-19 pandemic?
රෝගීන් දවසින් දවස වැඩි වෙන්නේ. මේ අපි හතරවෙනි රැල්ලට අතවනනවාද? ඒකයි අද ප්‍රශ්නය.
The director of the Lade Ridgeway Hospital for Children said that more than 5 children infected with COVID-19 are reported daily in Sri Lanka. He added that 10 children have died due to COVID-19 in the country so far.
All 10 children who died of COVID-19 had faced some form of complication along with COVID-19. Children must not be allowed to maintain too much of contact with outsiders. You should not send them out of your residence and into the community unless it is necessary. As over 500 children have been confirmed to have contracted COVID-19 in Sri Lanka so far, Dr. Vijay Surya urged parents to pay special attention to children who are already suffering from complications such as cardiac issues and respiratory conditions. Meanwhile, the World Health Organization has issued warnings on the spread of the Delta COVID-19 variant across the world.
The Delta variant is ripping around the world at a scorching pace. As countries lift public health and social measures, they must consider the impact on health workers and health systems. In countries with low vaccine coverage, the situation is particularly bad. Even countries that successfully managed to ward off the early waves of the virus through public health measures alone are now in the midst of devastating outbreaks. Delta is now in more than 104 countries, and we expect it to soon be the dominant COVID-19 strain circulating worldwide.
Will vaccines provide protection from the Delta variant?
There are reports coming in that in vaccinated populations you have cases of infection, particularly with the Delta variant. The majority of people who are ending up in hospital are unvaccinated. We know that vaccines are not going to protect 100% against infection. They do confer some protection, but you can definitely get infected and pass it on to others, and that's why we talk about continuing to wear the masks and do the distancing and take all the precautions. You need 2 doses of any of the 2-dose vaccines to be fully protected against the Delta variant.
How long will it require to eradicate the global pandemic?
We're in the midst of a growing 2-track pandemic where the haves and have-nots within and between countries are increasingly divergent. The 2-tier pandemic is worrying us. One, it's risky to those people who think that they're okay. And second, they will ignore the rest of the world and will give a chance to this virus to continue to circulate. I'm sorry to say this. I think anybody can see that it's greed. And this is for our own sake. And nobody is out of the woods yet. And please, especially those who have the means, it can be done. If we do it as aggressively as possible, vaccines can be produced enough and the world can be opened up. In few months, it can open up.
And keeping up with more headline-making stories, a court has granted permission for 4 suspects, including former Minister Rishad Bathiuddin's wife, to be detained and questioned over the death of a 16-year-old domestic helper. The order was issued when the suspects were produced before Colombo Additional Magistrate Kanchana Niranjana De Silva.
Police have arrested a broker involved in employing a 16-year-old girl as a domestic helper at the residence of parliamentarian Rishad Bathiuddin. Deputy Solicitor General Dileep Piris told court that the suspect was involved in employing 10 other underage girls as domestic helpers at houses of Rishad Bathiuddin's relatives. He had also told the Colombo Additional Magistrate Kanchana Niranjana De Silva that the mother had sent her daughter to parliamentarian Bathiuddin's house to wipe off a 30,000 rupee debt she had obtained from the broker. He added that 2 police teams are conducting extensive investigations to determine whether the death of the girl was a result of suicide or murder. Meanwhile, the Deputy Solicitor General told court that human trafficking is taking place as children from families battling economic difficulties in estate areas are employed as domestic helpers by rich families. Accordingly, he had pointed out that it is regrettable to note that such incidents are taking place at the residence of a member of parliament, in which laws must be formulated to prevent such crimes. The Colombo Additional Magistrate ordered the police to detain and question 4 suspects for 48 hours starting from this morning. The brother-in-law of the parliamentarian had been arrested previously over charges of sexually abusing a domestic helper who had been employed at his residence. The additional magistrate had ordered for the suspects to be produced in court at 10 a.m. on Monday.
Religious observances seeking justice for Ishalini was organized by the students and staff of CCTA Mahavidyalaya in Puakpitiya today. A group of women staged a protest at the Trincomalee Anuradhapura junction, demanding to protect the rights of women and children. They also urged that the law must be enforced on criminals properly. The Heroes Democratic Front organized a protest in Hatton, demanding to set up regional offices of the National Child Protection Authority. Meanwhile, a protest demanding justice for Ishalini was held at the Test Board Estate in Nanuoya today. Some civic groups organized a protest at the Jaffna Central bus stand demanding justice for the death of the 16-year-old girl. Several politicians were present during the protest.
Trade unions representing teachers and principals staged a protest in Puttalam based on several demands, including salary anomalies. Several teachers and principals in the Puttalam district attended the protest. They are saying that the salaries of teachers must be paid from the taxes charged from the public. We would like to ask whether murderers who were released and appointed as chairmen of corporations are being paid using their own money. No, it is our tax money. We won't stop our struggles regardless of the government's tricks. Meanwhile, diverse views were expressed on resolving the salary anomalies of teachers. I believe that Professor G.L. Piris engaged in a fruitful discussion with trade unions recently. He had said that he hopes to table a cabinet proposal to resolve these issues. I haven't seen it yet. That would most probably be tabled on Monday.
This is not a struggle for the rights of teachers. This is a work plan to inconvenience the government and the public. Therefore, we are respectfully requesting the teachers who are protesting to avoid gathering people during a pandemic to achieve ulterior motives, instead of attempting to resolve issues that have existed for the past 24 years.
We are all here today because of our teachers. Although there is a government, we have to admit that a solution has not been provided for the issues in providing suitable wages and facilities for teachers. On the other hand, children are our country's most valuable resource. Teachers have been voluntarily conducting online lessons for those children. However, the innocent and poor children are facing massive challenges as teachers have withdrawn from their services. Therefore, an unbiased decision must be made regarding this. That doesn't imply that the anomalies in the salaries and facilities of teachers must not be resolved.
They are creating an impression that it is wrong for teachers to take to the streets and that it is not the right time. They are asking them to take to the streets at an auspicious time. It is during these difficult times that they are selling off the port city to China, giving away the Keravalapitia plant to the United States, and selling off the Western Container Terminal to India instead of the East Container Terminal and making plans to import vehicles more than 50 million rupees to those in parliament. It seems that all of these are correct and acceptable, and that it is wrong when the people take to the streets.
Opposition leader Sajid Premadasa has said that the Sir John Kotalawala University must be allowed to run in its operation without any changes. He has added that his party will not allow anyone to impose obstacles to the system of free education in the country.
As a party, we will protect the values of free education. We will not allow anyone or any group to interfere with the system of free education in the country. Regarding the Kotalawala issue, we wish to clearly state that the defence units should be allowed to run its operations as it has always been, but we will not allow free education to be affected by annexing this with it. Therefore, we wish to tell the country and the government that the Samagi Jana Balawegaya is not the United National Party. The Samagi Jana Balawegaya will not confine itself to labels such as liberals, socialists or left-wing politics.
සමාජවාදීද දක්ෂිනාංශකද වාමාංශිකද මේ වගේ ලේබල් වලට අපි කොටු වෙන්නේ නැහැ.
Opposition leader Sajid Premadasa expressed these remarks during a meeting with social media activists in the Gampha district. The meeting had taken place at the opposition leader's office.
A protest organized by the Samagi Jana Balawegaya was staged in Kurunegala today. The protest was organized by parliamentarian Ashok Abesingha.
The protest was staged opposing several issues including the rising cost of living and the suppression of protests. MP Ashok Abesingha expressed critical remarks on the proposed legislation to grant amnesties over undisclosed taxes. Have they brought forward this bill with the intention of laundering this money? If this bill is passed, it will result in a crisis in the banking sector. Meanwhile, another protest organized by the Samagi Jana Balawegaya was staged in Pulgahawila today, demanding for a reduction in the cost of living. The government came into power promising to provide relief. They said that they will provide free fertilizer. But today there is no fertilizer. Farmers and professionals across the country have taken to the streets against this government. We will form the next government under the leadership of Sajid Premadasa. The ruling faction is trying to suppress the media. Fuel prices are skyrocketing. Did we pump fuel from petrol sheds without a cost? After continuing to steal from these institutions, the government is now saying that the Ceylon Petroleum Corporation is suffering losses. A protest was organized by the Janata Vimukti Peramuna in the Suryababa town, demanding a solution for the rising cost of living.
Views were expressed on the current state of the economy of the country.
අද මේ රටේ ඩොලර් හිඟයක් තියෙනවා. ඒ වගේම ප්‍රධාන රාජ්‍ය බැංකු දෙක ලංකා බැංකුව හා මහජන බැංකුව ඩොලර්.
There is a shortage of US dollars in the country. Due to the shortage of dollars, the two main state banks, the Bank of Ceylon and People's Bank, are not able to issue letters of credit. This has affected their ability to import medicine, fertilizer, and in the future they will also not be able to import gas, crude oil and coal, and this country will face a famine and an energy crisis. This government has used these few valuable dollars in their possession for transactions such as purchasing Airbuses. Cabinet approval had been granted to use 500 million rupees to pay back part of the losses of over $1 billion that were caused to Sri Lankan Airlines by the relatives of the Rajapaksas. $240 million has already been given for this, but the government says that they don't have $180 million to import the fertilizer required by the farmers who feed the 22 million people of this country. That is the state of our nation. The country is bankrupt. In a month's time, we will slide into a more deeper crisis.
රටේ ප්‍රමුඛතාවයේ තත්ත්වය නේ රට බංකොලොත් අද. ඒක තව මාසයක් යනකොට මීටත් වඩා අරුබුදයට යනවා.
They are making remarks as if they handed us a clean country after strengthening the economy by filling the treasury with funds. We won't be facing a shortage of foreign currency reserves if they had governed properly. We are running a system that they destroyed, but it hasn't dropped to a level that they claim. Some people in their side sell dollars. They are trying to create a notion that there are no dollars in the country. The new finance minister Basil Rajapaksa has said that we have no issues with dollars. Who else other than the finance minister needs to say that we can continue to work with this? He says it because of his strength and because he knows the truth.
Opposition lawmaker Dr. Harsha De Silva says that a recent report of US investment bank Goldman Sachs has been misinterpreted.
US investment bank Goldman Sachs has published a report outlining possibilities of how Sri Lanka can handle its external financing needs in the near term. In one possibility, the report said Sri Lanka can meet its external funding needs at least until early 2021 without entering into a new International Monetary Fund program. It added that this can be done by relying on bilateral and multilateral facilities. According to the report, Sri Lanka would be able to meet its external financing needs if its US dollar bonds perform well after engaging with the IMF. Sri Lanka has $2.5 billion due in US bond maturities in the next 18 months. According to Goldman Sachs, this is equivalent to 55% of its total foreign reserves, which is one of the highest in developing market economies.
So the government has on social media sent out a statement, a part of what Goldman Sachs had said, which says, look, Sri Lanka will be able to comfortably get through 2021. While that statement is in the report, I think that is a misrepresentation of the gist of what they're saying. What Goldman Sachs is saying is that there are three possibilities or three potential scenarios, but they say that they are not willing to take a view on the likelihood of either of these scenarios actually coming true, which means all three possibilities do exist with a similar probability of happening.
China won the first gold medal at the 2020 Olympic Games held in Tokyo, Japan. Sportsmen and women representing Sri Lanka took part in various games in Tokyo today.
Sri Lanka's Tehani Egodawela took part in the qualifying round of the 10-meter air rifle event held at Asaka shooting range this morning with a total of 611.5 points. Tehani was placed 49th at the event. Anika Gafoor finished second in one of the preliminary rounds of the women's 100 meters butterfly with a finishing time of 1 minute and 5.33 seconds at the 2020 Tokyo Olympic Games.
Safeguard hand sanitizer. නවතම නිෂ්පාදන පෙළ නිරෝගිමත් දිවියකට.
FB එකෙන් Newsfirst ප්‍රවෘත්ති live බලන්න.
Sri Lankan Minister of Sports Namal Rajapaksa and Japanese Minister of Education, Culture, Sports, Science and Technology Koichi Higuita met today in Tokyo, Japan. Minister Namal Rajapaksa in a Facebook post said that Japan has always played a key role in the development of Sri Lanka and contributed greatly in aid and assistance. The minister said the discussion focused on strengthening bilateral relations between the two countries in the sectors of sports, youth affairs, education, and ways in which the two countries can strengthen their friendship.
Government for the people, by the people, with the people.
Workers engaged in commercial cultivation have been affected just as farmers who are facing a shortage of fertilizer. Daily wage workers in the tea industry are facing numerous hardships as a result of the fertilizer shortage.
Daily wage workers of tea estates in Bompelikanda, Uwaparanagama rely heavily on their daily income. But the shortage of fertilizer has dealt a massive blow on their livelihoods.
Moisture is required for the bud to grow. Without fertilizer, this bud won't grow. Our hands are wounded. There are no tea leaves without fertilizer. We are left with a little work due to the lack of fertilizer. The tea leaves don't grow as much as they used to.
The ban on fertilizer has affected us. We are finding it difficult to make ends meet.
Farmers of Ambilipitia Vavayaya in the D16 canal area point out that the fertilizer shortage has also affected the banana, lady's fingers and papaya cultivations in the area.
There is a saying that a person cannot swim if he is thrown into deep waters suddenly. Farmers have been deeply affected due to the government's sudden decision to ban chemical fertilizer. That must be accepted without debate. These cultivation methods cannot be changed overnight. A person does not have to be educated to understand this. There is no fertilizer. Many acres of paddy fields are of no use to the farmers. Not a single official arrived here to provide a solution or to assess the situation.
Hemakumara Nanayakara, who holds a doctorate in agriculture and is an expert in the field, expressed the following views on the fertilizer crisis in the country.
I have always said that trying to shift towards organic farming by banning chemicals and chemical fertilizer in a harvesting season will drag the country into a famine. I requested the President to avoid taking a foolish decision. Now we see that the government has become helpless in the face of our objection and is taking steps to import chemicals and chemical fertilizer. I am happy about the government's decision, but the country will be badly affected due to the arbitrary decisions of the government and not by the agriculture industry. We can see that the entire economy is being pushed into a state of despair.
අත්තනෝමතික තත්ත්වය යටතේ තමයි මේ රටට මේ විශාල විනාශය වෙන්නේ. කෘෂිකර්මාංශයෙන් නෙමෙයි මුළු රටේ ආර්ථිකයම සමස්තයක් හැටියට ගත්තාම අද බලවත් අගාධයකට වේගයකින් තල්ලු වේගෙන යන බව අපිට පෙනී යනවා.
US Secretary of State Anthony Blinken will travel to India next week.
US Secretary of State Anthony Blinken is set to meet India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Foreign Minister Subramaniam Jayashankar next week. The US Department of State said that the visit will be based on Indo-Pacific engagement, shared regional security interests, and the response to COVID-19. Blinken is also likely to discuss plans for an in-person summit of the Quad Group, comprising of India, Japan, Australia, and the US, which are acting to counter China's rising influence. Meanwhile, India received US-made helicopters and patrol planes this month. This includes a P-8 Poseidon maritime patrol aircraft and two MH-60R Seahawk helicopters. India's ambassador to the US called the induction of the aircrafts an important milestone in the US-India defense ties. Meanwhile, Vice Admiral A.B. Singh, the current flag officer commanding-in-chief of the Eastern Naval Command of the Indian Navy, took an observation tour of the Gulf of Mannar and the islands in the vicinity in the Sea of Sri Lanka. Vice Admiral A.B. Singh had toured the area on board a helicopter. Following the tour of the Mannar Basin, Vice Admiral A.B. Singh met with the Chief Minister of Tamil Nadu, M.K. Stalin. The tour was aimed at curbing illegal activities in the vicinity of the Mannar Basin, including the transport of narcotics, sea cucumbers, seahorses and illegal immigration. However, today, Sri Lankan fishermen alleged that a group of Indian fishermen on board fishing trawlers had cut off the nets that they had cast off the coast of Jaffna. Meanwhile, in another notable development in the region, Chinese President Xi Jinping has visited Tibet. Foreign media reported that Xi Jinping's visit was previously unannounced and it wasn't clear whether he had already returned to Beijing. The official Xinhua news agency reported that the Chinese president arrived on a 3-day visit, landing at the airport in Niangchi, which is located less than 20 kilometers from the border with India's Arunachal Pradesh.
India has deployed submarines in our seas to spy on our borders. Due to its close proximity to China, India has deployed submarines to spy on our territorial waters and invade our country. As such, our country is on the verge of a foreign invasion. All this has happened due to the shortcomings of this government. Those who said they would retrieve the country's resources that were sold previously are now continuing the sale of resources and further preparing plans to sell other resources as well. Dealing with only a selected few of the global powers may pose a threat to the country's independence, sovereignty and the territorial integrity. Therefore, it is much better to work together as collaboratively as possible with everyone. Attempting to deal with only a selected set of factions could lead to unnecessary problems in the future. Where did the Commander-in-Chief of India's Eastern Naval Command visit? Media reports showed that a Chinese company is operating a sea cucumber farm in the eastern province. Isn't this what the Commander-in-Chief went to observe? Sri Lanka is caught in the power struggle between India and China. Our country has been exposed to a huge risk in the face of a geopolitical rivalry between India and China. The incumbent government must bear the responsibility for this danger.
වර්තමාන රාජපක්ෂ රජය බාරගත යුතුයි.
Let's now take a look at the international roundup.
Rescuers in India have combed through mud and debris in a frantic search for survivors after heavy rains lashed the western state of Maharashtra, triggering landslides, flooding and a building collapse, and causing dozens of deaths. The state government in a statement said the death toll in multiple monsoon-related accidents since Thursday had risen to at least 76, with dozens of people missing. Other reports said the number of people killed had exceeded 100. Sound of gunfire has interrupted the funeral of the late Haitian president who was shot dead 2 weeks ago. Protesters clashed with police outside the venue and witnesses smelled tear gas at the ceremony, but it seems nobody was hurt. Authorities accuse foreign mercenaries of the killing, but questions about the attack remain. Meanwhile, Vietnam has imposed a 15-day lockdown in the capital Hanoi in an attempt to tackle a surge of coronavirus infections. The lockdown order, which was issued late yesterday, bans the gathering of more than 2 people in public. Only government offices, hospitals and essential businesses are allowed to stay open. Earlier in the week, authorities had suspended all outdoor activities in Hanoi and ordered non-essential businesses to close following an increase in cases.
And with that, we wrap up primetime news here on TV1. For more news, log on to our award-winning website, that is www.newsfirst.lk. For the News First team, I'm Devi Paldana. Take care and good night.